At 20 weeks, they found some heart defects and they said that there were some problems, and they did a lot of testing and said that she had a rare chromosomal disorder that was 1 in 7,000. She wasn't growing, she was less than 3%, and they said that she would likely not live. And so we were prepared to do fetal hospice. About 3 weeks later, she was in the 30th percentile. She started growing, she was doing well. They thought that maybe one of her heart defects was no longer there. And so we were hopeful. And she actually did survive birth, and she was born, and she lived 18 days. I remember my theology changing. God was already working on me, but I think my theology before, and I didn't realize it, was that God's not involved in bad things. We were like Jacob. We were kind of going along with our lives with not really much bad happening. And then when my daughter died, that was the most devastating thing that's ever happened. And the most, well, we'll talk about the other part, the most wonderful as well. Allie was the most important thing to me in the world, and even outside of the world. And God had to deal with me with that, about that too. I was mad because I didn't delight in God. I didn't have any joy in God. That was just really annoying. And I was annoyed that I didn't have that, but at the same time, it didn't seem possible.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't think I could ever get to that point. The only thing that I thought would bring me joy was a child, and having my child back specifically. And one night, I had several moments like this. I had a major breakdown. I was coming home. It's always hard at night when you're alone. And I was coming home and called Michael and told him, I said, I don't see the point in living. I don't see the point in anything. I can't do this. I'm just so unhappy. I'm just miserable. Because I had been seeing like evil in the world everywhere. And I just thought, this world is a terrible place. I don't want to be here. These people are terrible. Just every turn, there was just so much harshness and evil. And so I came home, and he had fallen asleep because he was just really tired and had to get up early the next day, and I couldn't sleep. And so I stayed up, and I kept thinking about everything that I had been reading, and I started reading 1 Corinthians, where it talks about death, because I had been hearing a lot of death lately too, and I was angry about that. I was like, why do we have to get old? Why do we have to die? This is so unfair. I just couldn't take it anymore. And so I started reading that 1 Corinthians, where it says, death, where is your sting?
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about where death is swallowed up in victory. And I was like, swallowed up in victory? I just kept pondering that and reading 1 Corinthians, and I read a bunch of things that night, just kept reading and searching, and I started praying and started thinking about eternal life and the evil in the world. And then when I started praying early in the morning, I didn't just see the evil in the world, I started to see the evil in my own heart. In every action, there was sin, wickedness that I didn't see before. I never saw my sin. You know, I had asked the Lord into my heart when I was 8 years old and searched for him all my life and prayed to him and read the Bible once in a while. Oh, I got to remember to read the Bible was always the thought. But this time, I couldn't get away from it. It's like my days would come up and all my actions and everything I was doing would come up to my mind, and I would just see my sin. And it made me sick and it made me sad, because I realized that all the evil I was seeing around me was in my own heart. And it was so much that it was overwhelming. It was so overwhelming. And then when you realize that the whole world's evil and so are you, I just felt panicked, and I felt sad, and I felt depressed, and I actually wanted to die. And I just called out to God, and I just said, Lord, I need you to help me. And please save me and forgive me for all this sin. What I remember in my heart, I was thinking, what to do, what to do. I had this panicky feeling. And I just called out to him, and I started confessing all these sins and just seeing them just throughout my life, just major stuff that I didn't think I was really sinning very much. Almost never, I guess, is what I thought. That night, when I felt my sin and I kept praying, I started to feel hope. And the hope that I felt was that I, even if in my sinful state and as wicked as I am, I get eternal life. And I kept reading about that, and I just thought, wow, eternal life. And I just went to sleep thinking about that. And then I woke up and I had that corny, I want to tell the whole world about what happened. And I didn't have that when I was 8 years old, or throughout my life. I never had that feeling. Suddenly, I really appreciated the gift. I understood the gift for the first time. Before, it was more intellectual. Didn't grab my heart. You know, I would just think, oh, I'm so glad we get eternal life. But this was like personal. I knew for a fact that I personally was as wicked as the worst serial killer, just like anybody else. And that all of our hearts are, that is the state of our heart, is that we are truly wicked. And the good news is, the bad news is that's a terrible, horrible thing. The good news is that we get eternal life for that, because he has grace on us. And that finally was a big deal to me, and still is. Yeah. It's a huge deal. I started talking about Allie's death, and how, well, God did a lot of changes even after that day through counseling and prayer, and he's just been working on me for a long time, but months. Basically, I started sharing. People would ask me all the time. I wouldn't have to go up to people, hey, can I tell you about this? They'd say, so how are you doing so well after your daughter died? What's going on? And then I would share that with them. Then I started to have joy and thank God that my daughter was born, lived, and died. Because of her death, I know God more than I ever did. I have a relationship with Christ that's not me looking in from the outside. I feel like if I had any doubts about salvation before, I have none now. And it's the most important thing to me. And that hasn't changed. Just like when God lamed Jacob. I keep thinking about that. I don't know why. But it was a perpetual reminder to him. It says in Knowing God. Allie, the way the past couple months, he's been using her as she's a perpetual reminder. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about her. And immediately, she points me to Christ. It's like God has used her in that way. And I know that there's a purpose in the most horrible, devastating things of our life that God knows about, and that it's for our good. It's truly for our good. On that night, when I realized my sinful state and who God is and what he did for me, he also showed me that something else. He showed me that my whole life was about me before my daughter died. Like I had this image of a big Nebuchadnezzar-sized idol that was to myself. And everything was about what I could do, my abilities. That was my worth. I got my worth from anything I could do or be or whatever. So I told myself, I didn't realize it, but I deceived myself, told myself a bunch of lies to feel good about myself. And after my daughter died, of course, I was devastated and didn't have any joy in the world. But then knowing that because of my daughter dying, good came from it, and God specifically drew me close to him. And saved me just is the best thing ever that's ever happened to me.
So you believe that God used your daughter's death to save you?
Yeah. Yep. I used to think, another thing about my old theology, I used to think that being salvation was like a table that was set with lots of food and you could just reach over and take it. It wasn't that way for me at all. It just seemed like something that he did to me, that he lifted some big curtain or scales or something from my eyes and just showed me my sin, showed me who I was, showed me that I needed his grace and his salvation. And it's something, I think the faith came from God. And that's different too. I used to think faith was something that you kind of had to work at, even though I told myself, oh, it's by grace you're saved. And I think it was something that I used to think was I had to create or work on. I always tell people, I call my situation with Allie, the whole thing from 20 weeks till when she was born. And I'm not crying now because I'm so sad and devastated. I am just so amazed because I call it my beautiful trial, because it is. It's the most amazing thing that I've ever been through. And God has just done so many things through it. Yes, it's hard. Yes, I have times when I'm depressed, but I never, ever feel alone now. Even in the most devastating, difficult time of your life, even when it's crazy, insane, doesn't make sense, that you can have joy. You can have joy in knowing that God is in control, that he is good, and that he has your best interest at heart.